Welcome back to Module 1.3 of our Unity series. We are going to be delving into biblical unity and family, and we're going to look at the origin of family breakdown and dysfunction. But before I start that, can I congratulate you guys? Whew, because we have covered 2 modules. This is our third one, and it's a lot to take in, and I hope that you'll spend the appropriate amount of time looking at it, revisiting it, and looking at the slides that are attached so that you can get the most of this. And it's important that you share this information and that you rehearse this information so that it can be part of your long-term memory. So let's just delve right in. So why family? For some people, family is synonymous with drama or pain. But that wasn't God's original idea for family. God had a good plan because he's a good God. Isn't that something? He had a good plan because he's a good God. But we know because of Adam and Eve and their fall that we landed in a position that was outside of God's plan. It became our plan, which tells us that whenever we step outside of God's will and God's order, when we cross that boundary, because our God has so many boundaries, good boundaries, that we experiment, as Miles Monroe said, and then the outcome is abuse, chaos, and dysfunction. So here we are with the origin of family versus what eventually happened to family and what we're still dealing with. We're dealing with the residual impact of sin and rebellion and operating outside of the boundary of God. Now, Eden was this beautiful place, and it was the spot, it was the place, it was the enclosed place. And we know that they had the flaming sword later when they left, but it was a protected place, and their obedience and their relationship with God kept them in unity. That was the perfect family spot. So God intended for us to have Eden relationships and to have an Eden family experience. So when things go awry and when there's abuse in the family, that's not God's fault. That is the sole result of Adam's sin. And because we know through the Bible, it tells us that because of Adam, one man's sin entered into the world. But by one man's righteousness has entered into the world. So while we're going to cruise and look at the ramifications of the fall and the origin of family, we're also going to be hopeful that we can follow God's plan and get back on track and have our family a personal Eden in the midst of this chaos, in the midst of a selfish society. We're living in the West, let's be honest, where it's all about me and it's not about family, it's about my happiness. But that wasn't always the case. We know that there was an idea of unity because God was unified with Adam. God made Adam in his image. God and Adam were in fellowship. He was communicating with him, and he was able to relate to him because he was a part of him. You know, when he created everything else, he didn't pull from himself. He spoke to it, but he says that he made Adam in his image. And so Adam was a part of God in his creativity and his ability to think, his ability to call things out and have them to be, and his dominion that he gave him. He was one with God in fellowship and in God's plan for his life. We know that God's additional plan was that it was not good for Adam to be all one, but he wanted him to be like him in the sense that he could express his love to another human being and that he could procreate with another human being. So he put Adam to sleep, and he was able to take his rib out, and he formulated Eve, Adam's counterpart. And so we know that that was the beginning of the family of Adam and the earth. They were supposed to be able to be one. Their names was Adam at the time. Her name was not Eve until after the fall. So they were one. They were in unity. And their assignment was to multiply. And their assignment was to have dominion. And their assignment was to walk in unity with God and with one another. But sin is disruptive. And we see that the first thing that happened, whenever there's selfishness and whenever there is disobedience, the first thing that happened was Adam and God's relationship was disrupted. The family of Adam and God and Eve, it was disrupted. So that was the first family breakdown. And then the second breakdown was that eventually everyone went for their own, because when God came to communicate, Adam was like, hey, it's her, this woman you gave me. He didn't say my wife, he didn't go down with one band, one sound. There was division. It was every man for himself and God for us all. And as the head, he didn't take responsibility for her. He was no longer one with her, because God said, for this cause shall a man leave his family and cleave to his wife. So they were supposed to be one, but he alienated her and only took accountability. He didn't even really take accountability. He blamed her and he stood alone. So that was the onset of selfishness and individuality. It was the onset, and we are feeling the shock waves from that sin throughout our families today, that selfishness and individuality. Wherever there is individuality, there is selfishness and there is a demise of the unity of the family. Our families are disrupted and destroyed at the end of the day because someone decided to go for their own. Because when a family unit, when a husband and wife are both moving in the direction of God, they can't help but come together. But what happens is that they begin to fend for themselves, like Adam and Eve, which disrupts their unity pattern. And they no longer have the ability to walk in that alignment of agreement. So selfishness is an enemy. It's the number one enemy of the family unit. Selfishness, individuality, how I feel, what I need. And so when that shows up, there is a blatant disruption in the family. So we've seen the disruption between God and Adam and Eve. We saw the trickling down to Adam and Eve. And then we see it among the siblings, because God allowed Eve to have a baby and to continue to go on and create a family. And with that family, there began to be selfishness again. Cain did not like the response that Abel got from God, and God communicated with him, and God addressed his issues and let him know that if you do right, then you'll be okay. But if you don't, then sin is at the door and you're going to be overtaken. So jealousy was introduced to humanity. Remember we talked about the Browns? Yeah, this is where the Browns got their issues from. They got their issues from selfishness, and then consequently, that next was competition and jealousy. Jealousy is so egregious because it just states that I'm not connected to you, because you'll never be jealous of somebody you're connected to. If my husband won something at work, $1 million something, or if he got a bonus, or if he got a contract for millions of dollars, I would not be jealous. Why would I? Because we're one. And guess what? I'm spending that money too. We're going to celebrate together. So jealousy is a declaration that I am not connected to you. And if you're not connected to someone, you are dangerous. Jealous people are dangerous people, even within a family. And we see how dangerous they are when we see how Cain responded in jealousy and comparison. He killed his brother because he was jealous and selfish. That is the onset of division and separation in a family. You wonder how family members can talk about each other. You wonder how family members could sleep with one another's spouses, how they could abuse one another, how they could steal from one another, how they could take inheritances and cheat and connive to have money, because it is jealousy and comparison. When you don't feel connected to someone, you will not protect them, you will not love them, you will not be patient and kind. They can easily become your enemy. They can become your obstacle to your selfishness. If you become an obstacle to someone's selfishness, they will remove you physically, emotionally, whatever it is. If you stand in the way of their happiness, they will divorce you, they will write you off, and they'll be estranged from you. So we see that. We see that Cain and Abel, they suffered from what many families do, which is jealousy, selfishness first. You thought about yourself, and you didn't like the way you felt. So instead of improving, you decided to murder someone's reputation or murder someone physically. And so then we look at another story that shows how sin and selfishness disrupts a family is when we look at David's family and we see how his daughter was raped by her half-brother because of selfishness. First, he wanted her, he lusted after her, and then what he did after that was he took her purity because he was selfish and he didn't care about the integrity of the family or the unity of the family or her. So abuse, again, is always indicative of the fact that you're thinking about your pleasure. You're not thinking about that child's life you're ruining. You're not thinking about that spouse that you're betraying. You're not thinking about how the emotional damage that you're giving that child by speaking to them in negativity and hurtful words. You're thinking about your frustration, your impatience, and how you feel. And as a result, it's about you. And you people are dangerous to the community, just like they were in the Bible.